Hello, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Ashley Craven, and I am the marketing director of Gryphon House. And today we are so lucky to be joined by Dr. Elizabeth Joy Erwin. Dr. Erwin is a professor of education at Montclair State University, where she prepares current and future teachers to think critically, reflect deeply, and teach inclusively, all very important things. Her soon-to-be published book with Gryphon House is called The Power of Presence, a guide to mindfulness in early childhood. And that book will be published very, very soon with, like I said, with Gryphon House. So Elizabeth, Dr. Erwin has published widely in prestigious academic journals, and she's authored multiple books and chapters on a variety of topics related to early childhood inclusive education, such as mindfulness, well-being, and family-professional partnerships, with a central focus on diversity, particularly young children with disabilities. Dr. Erwin has engaged in educational inquiry and projects with universities around the world, and Dr. Erwin currently lives in New York City, where she practices yoga and meditation every day. So Dr. Erwin, hello, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Ashley. It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and so good to see you.
Yes, of course. So, Dr. Erwin, your incredible expertise with early childhood and mindfulness and the power of presence. It really, it's so beautiful, and I think all of those things combine so well. And I love how in previous conversations you refer to yourself as a mindfulness student, and I think that is so important, and it's something that I feel like we're all students of the mindfulness practice.
It is a journey. It's a lifelong journey, I think, for all of us, and I think it just becomes a little easier over time because it's like a muscle. The more we practice, the more we're able to just kind of bounce back when we get triggered or we have an off moment. So yeah, we're all on the journey together.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, so today we'll talk about stillness and what that means for young children and how we can bring that into their lives. But before we dig into that, I love the way that you framed this as, it's a muscle that we're continuing to work and continuing to figure out how to work and how it works, how to work it for different types of people in different ages, especially during times that you might be triggered. Right now, I feel as though with routines being all up in the air, children home from school, parents, maybe families are trying to work from home and do homeschool and everything else on the list. And so I think that ability to be flexible and that ability to kind of react to your current reality is so crucial and so important now more than ever. So I love that. I love that you mentioned that.
I appreciate what you're saying because in a way that is life. I mean, obviously now we're going through something extraordinary. It's unprecedented. And I feel that, like that muscle you were saying, is really about resilience. It's being able to bounce back when something unexpected happens and where there is uncertainty, but in a way, I also think it's like a mirror. Let me back up. It's a mirror to life in general because we really don't know what's going to happen the next day or the day after. We have this false sense of security generally, before this all happened, but in a way, we don't really know. So this resilience about, what do we do when life presents us with this? You and I were talking a little bit before, I've heard some people talking about, feeling just so stuck at home. And for me, I love being home. I'm so grateful. I have a roof over my head when so many people, I'm in New York City, as you were mentioning, don't have that, or are dealing with food insecurity and not having enough, or knowing where their meals are coming. So I do think it's about reframing, where we are. And so that practice of mindfulness just helps us, I think, to bounce back quicker when we kind of get off track, if we're not feeling terribly grounded or anchored or mindful. So that's why it's really a practice day to day, because
Mm-hmm.
life really is all about change. This just happens to be a pretty surreal experience that we're all going through.
That's so true. Well, thank you for sharing that. I would love to dive into today's topic, which is stillness. And how does stillness fit into that whole concept of resilience? And how do you explain stillness to a child?
Well, it's a great question. This idea of stillness, I think, is something we as the adults need to explore and contemplate a little bit, because we don't often invite stillness in. It's kind of interesting. It's been said that we're human beings, not human doings, but really we're constantly on the go and doing, instead of being. And so I think of stillness as a way just to be still and quiet, to be comfortable in silence. That's another thing I think that we as a society struggle with, this idea of just saying nothing. We often fill up the time with chatter, and if it's not us talking, it's often our minds kind of chattering about the past or the future, or making judgments or comparisons. So I think children actually live in a state of, we've talked about this before, a state of joy and wonder. And with that comes stillness. I think children naturally need the balance of, activity and also quiet. And I don't mean just taking a nap, that's like resting, sleeping, that's super important as well. But what we're talking about is just quiet and stillness. And it's not multitasking, because then we're not really being present in what's happening in the moment. It's stillness, I think, also is about noticing. When we just take the time to be very still, we just notice more things. I'll give you one quick example. It happened the other day, and I'm working a lot, as everybody else, is on the computer. I'm on way more than I like to be. And the other day, I looked out my window, and I have these like huge, beautiful windows, and I could see all these big skyscrapers and the sky. But I happened to look out, and across the way, there was, I guess, this little puddle, and there was a bird splashing. Did we talk about this? I don't think so. I think we were talking about this in the class that I was teaching last night. Anyway, and I saw this bird in this puddle splashing, and it wasn't for like a few seconds. It was like for a few minutes. And it was just so delightful. This bird was playful and splashing and like flew away and then came right back. And it was just so lovely. It was so amazing. And those are the kind of moments I think I would miss if I wasn't practicing mindfulness, if I didn't step away from the computer and have moments of stillness and just kind of being. So it's about noticing, noticing those moments in life.
Right. And so I love that. And so when you think of families and children, and the idea of children are always watching adults and older children. And so what is the importance of a parent or a family member practicing stillness and modeling stillness to have it be successful for a child?
Well, that's a great question. Again, I think it's everything, because children look to see what we're doing. It's not so much what we say, but it's what we're doing and how we are being. That's what they notice. So it's not necessarily our words, it's kind of the energy we're transmitting. And if we're not still, or kind of not even teaching, but being in stillness together with them, it's not a value that they will care about. And it's interesting. I think about in early childhood schools all over the world, the one thing you see is an outdoor playground, right, where kids are active, and there's swings and slides and all these kind of fun, playful ways for children to be active. We don't have that in schools or in homes when it comes to stillness. It's funny, we might have like nap time, but children are sleeping or resting and reading a book. They're still doing something, as opposed to just sitting in stillness. And so I think it's super important that we do that with children. I may have mentioned last time I have a grown daughter. She's 24. She's also an early childhood teacher. And when she was younger, I would, be sitting in the morning I have a piece pillow or a piece of cushion, meditating, and she would kind of toddle over and just plop in my lap. And we would just sit together, not saying anything, just breathing together. And it was one of those sweet moments that I really remember from childhood. It was just precious.
That is sweet. And I think I've shared with you in the past, I am a yoga instructor, and I know yoga and mindfulness are different, but very related. And one thing that I learned in yoga training was, meditation training. And one thing that we learned about was how to take it in bite-sized chunks. And I'm curious if maybe that would be helpful for families to help implement some sort of, mindfulness routine where, the idea of meditating for an hour or frankly 20 minutes could be terrifying.
Yes.
Sitting with your own thoughts could be terrifying, or in silence when you're used to being so busy. So what are some ways that we could help set up families to say, here's a way that you can very easily, start this practice and build up as you go?
Well, I have to say that I think even 5 minutes, if it's totally new, it can be so overwhelming. So when it comes to even breathing or sitting quietly, 1 minute might be enough. 2 minutes might be enough at the very beginning. And, you could use like a sand timer or some other kind of timer. The funny thing is once, it becomes habit and a routine, it doesn't seem long enough. And I do a breathing activity. I was doing it this morning with a former student. We were breathing together, and it was 5 minutes. And at the end, he said, boy, that went by quickly. So when we put the roots down and really plant these seeds and they take root, that 1 minute can turn into 2. And there are ways to be mindful and to be in stillness. One way is just to connect with nature, to just go out and either for a walk or to sit in nature and just sit and just, no talking, just sit together. It's interesting. I was saying I have these big windows. One of the most spectacular sights I have out my window is a sunset. I mean, it is just gorgeous. It's stunning. Purple and pink, and I'm always in awe. I always make time to notice. And I often will watch the sun set, like from beginning to end, just watch it. And often what will happen is, these tears of joy come up. It's just overwhelming in terms of beauty and magnificence. And so that's a perfect thing to do with very young children. Watch the sun set. Just sit and watch. If you're in a space, you can do that, or watch the sun rise and just watch it, or even watch the moon and the stars. Again, I think the whole idea about noticing is to really say nothing. It's not about talking or commentary or putting a label on it. It's just about kind of being in that moment and looking at that extraordinary connection we have to nature. So
yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it seems like you've shared, a lot of different ways. So one that you've shared previously was breathing exercises, and we'll make sure to share a link along with this video to a breathing exercise that you've done with our audience in the past to help guide people along with that. And then, you know, just paying attention to nature, whether it's the sunrise or a little bird splashing in water, and just noticing that. I love that. And then what about mindfulness books? I know that, you know, you've shared in the past, you've in other segments, which of course we will share links in this video, to mindfulness books or breathing books. Do you think of that as a way to practice presence, or do you think of that as a separate activity?
Well, there are two kinds of reading books. I think one for adults. I will say I'm often reading several books at one time. That's just what I do. I'm a teacher and a learner, but I'm always reading a book, like a novel, but also a book about mindfulness. So I have that right by my bed. And as an adult, I read it because, you know, I can take that into my own day-to-day living. In addition, I think there are books, as you're saying, for children that teach about kindness or about peace. So they might not even have mindfulness in the title, but it might be a book about breathing. And it's just, you know, a reminder to slow down, to be in stillness. In fact, this, you know, whole global crisis, I think is really an invitation for us to slow down and to be in stillness, you know, more often. So I think a book is a great way of sparking a conversation or an idea, you know, and I think often children have the best ideas when it comes to finding ways to, you know, just be still or have a silent walk outside, those kinds of things.
Yeah, that's nice. I think those are beautiful activities that can take 1 minute, can take 20 minutes, but there's really, you know, there's a host of ways that families can practice mindfulness and presence with young children. So thank you for sharing all of those different ideas. And I think, you know, they sound very approachable and not at all scary or overwhelming. So we will make sure to share links to the breathing exercise and other mindfulness book readings that you've done, so folks can also, you know, share and breathe along with us and read along with us and their children. So thank you, Dr. Erwin, for sharing those great ideas with us today.
Thank you, Ashley. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you again.